So I study how social media are used in K-12 classroom settings, with a particular attention towards the ways in which those can support the development of what are called 21st century skills or deeper learning or other kinds of higher order thinking skills. And I'm drawn to that area primarily because I was a classroom teacher and I've spent a lot of time in schools in lots of places, and I sort of wake up in the morning with this vision of children sitting at desks that are bolted to the floor while teachers talk at them, really bored. And that vision every morning of thinking of all of these kids in schools sort of in learning environments where their full potentials aren't being tapped is profoundly painful to me, and so I think of my research as trying to think about ways that we can challenge that and to challenge teachers to give more responsibility to learners. So I was a classroom teacher in the social studies. So I taught ninth grade world history, and I taught electives to seniors. And one thing unusual about the way my teaching started was when I was hired, they said, "We need you to teach world history." And I said, "Well, I've never done that before, but sure." And they said, "We're doing this experiment, this pilot, where we're gonna have a cart of laptops in the corner of your room, and we'd like you to use them every day." And this was back in 2003, so relatively, early on, kind of the move to one-to-one computing in K-12 environments. And so I went in and taught this world history class, and not because I was particularly drawn to technology, but because I was asked to do this as a condition of employment. I ended up experimenting in lots of different ways of using technology, particularly to turn responsibility for learning over to my students. I mean, it was important that it happened in a world history classroom, because one thing about being a brand new world history teacher is it's impossible to stand in front of your students and honestly say, "Oh, I'm an expert in this domain. I really know kind of what's happened to human beings over the last 6,000 years." I think you have to be honest with your students and say, "I promise you that I'm much better at learning this than you are," and come in with a real strong foundation of knowledge. And I can be a lead learner, but I can't teach you all of this material. We have to be exploring this together. And then thinking about the ways technology and digital media supported that approach to learning and inquiry. I think one of the things that's been really striking to people is the degree to which social media tools have transformed many different sectors of the world, the way that they've transformed politics, the way that they've transformed economics, the way that they've transformed journalism. And I think there were lots of good reasons to hypothesize that social media could transform education as well, but it has not happened. That in many ways, it's always safe to bet on the conservatism of educational institutions, and social media hasn't transformed practices in particularly K-12 education, to some extent, maybe more so in higher education. And so I think what drew me to that was the extraordinary potential that I saw in my classroom and what my colleagues were doing and what I knew the opportunities were, but then also having this sense that this was both an untapped resource, but also one that a lot of people were hypothesizing was be a real game changer and be really transformative. And I thought that was a question that we could answer empirically. We could say, well, let's try to figure out to what extent these tools are being used and the ways in which they're being used, and try to gather some data to be able to answer those questions of, okay, what impact are Web 2.0 tools, social media tools having in K-12 classrooms? So the impact I would hope my work would have within the research community would be, first, our research takes an approach of trying to do large-scale online content analysis. So we take hundreds of thousands of online learning environments that are created across the world, and then randomly sample from those environments. And in our case, for our first set of studies, we looked at just a subsample of US K-12 online learning environments, wikis in particular. And because we sample from the entire population, we can describe the distribution of behaviors across that population. We can say, with empirical data to support us, this is how wikis are being used in K-12 classrooms, and here's how they're being used differently in high school versus elementary school, or in science classes versus English classes, and this is how many are collaborative, and this is how many fail right off the bat, and this is how many are used as individual student presentations. The short-term impact of the research I'm doing right now is to be able to provide some data to researchers and say, this is what the landscape of wiki use and kind of as a proxy for social media use in K-12 classrooms look like. And then for the, I think most educational technology researchers are doing kind of qualitative design research, case study research, and be able to say, okay, here's what the whole landscape looks like, here's what the distribution looks like. You can use that to give some context to your work. The methods that we developed to do that were this large-scale online content analysis, where basically we've been drawing it. One of the exciting things about online learning environments is that they record in continuous time everything that students and teachers and educators and learners do in those environments. We've been thinking about referring to this kind of data as Scribble data, scalable, real-time, individual behavior and learning data, or Scribble data. And the acronym has the significance of both capturing the first initials of those words, but also then noting that what we're capturing is people's scribbles. We capture the little mistakes, the little interactions, the comments, the additions, the notes, the deletions that learners and educators create in real time. And as we explore and figure out what to do with this space, there's tremendous possibilities around learner analytics, being able to say, let's try to use this continuous data stream to learn about the process of learning, to be able to see what learners' developmental trajectories look like in various kinds of dimensions, and then be able to, because we're doing this constant real-time formative assessment, intervene in real time. So rather than testing kids at the end of the year and then waiting until October for the results to show up when kids are in a different grade and there's not really much you can do with that data, to try to give educators real-time feedback. And then to propose different ways of assessing students' development in different kinds of skills. So one challenge that we have in the United States is that we try to test on an annual basis reading comprehension and computation skills. Those are the only two things that we test at a national level. They take about a month out of the school year. And we know that there's many, many more dimensions of student competency that we want to know about. We want to know about their historical thinking skills. We want to know about their scientific understanding and scientific thinking skills. We want to test their creativity and their critical thinking and their communication. We can't develop end-of-year tests for all of those things, or they'll spend from December to May just taking tests. So we have to develop measures that assess students' capacity as they're in the process of going about their daily routines of learning. And I think this kind of real-time data is has tremendous possibilities for doing that. One way I frame that often is to say, I have this hunch, I don't know if it's true, but I have this hypothesis, that if you could count the number of words that a student writes between 7th grade and 12th grade, that would be a better predictor of college persistence than any standardized test of writing that we've ever come up with. I think it has a pretty good likelihood of being true, and if it were true, then conceivably you could think really differently about how you assess students over their course of their high school career, that if in fact simply, and that's a dumb measure, counting number of words is the simplest thing we could possibly do in this kind of space of capturing students' activities. But if that, simplistic, stupid measure was better than these incredibly sophisticated, standardized writing tests that we've developed, then I think it would really, give us an opportunity to fork down a different assessment pathway. Well, I think the digital media and learning community is an incredibly diverse community. Education is incredibly diverse, sort of digital media and technology is incredibly diverse. And so when you bring those two big spheres together and you have an even bigger sphere. So the people who enter this space are coming from very different directions. They're art educators, they're curriculum designers, they're community activists, they're computer programmers, they're gamers, they're psychologists. They're sort of coming from all of these different spaces, but it's a set of questions that unites us, questions that we approach from very different methodological perspectives. But this is, it's such a complicated field, and it is so, globally transformative that it does require people with lots of different perspectives to be able to join the conversation and work together to take their overlapping perspectives and make sense of it. So to me, the most important work that's happened is to have people with really different academic backgrounds, different disciplinary backgrounds, different methodological backgrounds to come together and talk with each other about what some of our similar questions are, and to continue to think about what kind of research we want to do and how we want that research to have an impact on people's lives, that are not researchers. So I became familiar with this because I'm on the a DML mailing list, maybe the DM. I'm on a DML mailing list of some kind that got this sent along to me, and I think this is a story that may be similar with a lot of other folks, that I am really interested in digital media and learning, but my advisors are not. So my advisors have a lot of methodological experience. They have some, one of my advisors did a lot of the early work on 21st century skills, which is an important body of research that connects to digital media and learning. But my advisors are not able to bring me into the community that I see myself working in moving forward. So as I think about finishing my PhD this year, one of my goals for this year is to, as I start looking towards the next, not just the next job I want to have, but the communities of practice that I want to be involved in my work, and recognizing that I was not going to be an economist and I was not going to be a statistician, which is what my advisors are, and I've benefited a ton from their methodological guidance and think they're fabulous. But I'm gonna I'm gonna work in a field rather than a discipline, and so this seemed to be an opportunity to meet other scholars in this field. Hoping to try to find collaborators, trying to find people to write grants with, people to work on papers with, people to read my work, to get to know the body of people who I'm hopefully will be reviewing my papers in the months and years ahead. And so that was what motivated me to come.